The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Nora Whitfield clutched her wedding dress, dragging herself alongside the broken-down wagon, her lips cracked from dehydration, and her hope fading with each labored step through the dusty terrain of 1875. The journey west to meet her mail-order groom had been perilous from the start. 3 days ago, the wagon driver who'd been paid to escort her to Copper Creek had abandoned her after their wagon wheel cracked on a jagged rock. He'd taken the only horse, promising to return with help, but Nora knew a liar when she saw one. Now, after days of walking, rationing the last drops of her water, the harsh reality of her situation closed in like the vultures circling overhead. Her knees buckled. The world tilted as she collapsed beside the broken wagon wheel that had sealed her fate. As consciousness began to slip away, she heard hoofbeats approaching hallucinations, surely. Death coming to claim her in the form of a mounted savior. "Dear Lord," a deep voice called out. Through blurred vision, she saw a man dismount and rush toward her. Strong arms lifted her from the ground, cradling her against a broad chest that smelled of leather and sun-warmed cotton. "Stay with me," the cowboy urged as he carried her to shade. Cool water touched her lips and Nora instinctively swallowed. "That's it, miss, small sips." When her vision cleared, she found herself looking into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a worn Stetson. The man wore simple trail clothes, a blue shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing muscular forearms and worn denims tucked into scuffed boots. "Owen Daniels," he introduced himself, his voice gentle as he held the canteen to her lips again. "Ranch foreman at the Triple Creek spread." "What in heaven's name are you doing out here alone, Miss Nora Whitfield?" she managed, her throat still raw. I was on my way to Copper Creek to be married," his expression darkened. "And your escort left you here," she nodded weakly. "The wheel broke. He said he'd bring help." "When?" "3 days ago." Owen's jaw tightened. "3 days? Madam, you're lucky to be alive." He glanced at the wagon, noting her few belongings scattered around it. "This groom of yours, does he know you're coming? Mr. Blackwell is expecting me on Saturday." Nora coughed. "Tomorrow." "Well, Miss Whitfield, I don't think you'll make it to Copper Creek by tomorrow in your condition." His voice was kind but firm. "Triple Creek is about 2 hours' ride from here. We can get you proper food, rest, and send word to your intended." Nora tried to stand but swayed dangerously. "I can't impose, you most certainly can," Owen interrupted, steadying her with a gentle hand. "And you will. My mother would have my hide if I left a lady stranded in the desert." A smile softened his weathered features. "Besides, I've got plenty of room on Thunder here." He nodded toward his chestnut gelding grazing nearby. "But my things, I'll send some men back for them today. Nothing will be lost, I promise." His eyes held hers. "Do you trust me, Miss Whitfield?" Something in his steady gaze made her nod. "I do, Mr. Daniels." "Owen, please." He helped her to her feet. "Can you ride?" "I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania," she said with unexpected defiance. "I could ride before I could walk properly," he chuckled, the sound warming something inside her. "That's good to hear. Let me help you up then." With surprising gentleness for such a rugged man, Owen lifted Nora onto his horse before mounting behind her. His arms encircled her as he reached for the reins, creating a safe haven she hadn't felt in months, not since her parents' passing had forced her to consider the mail-order arrangement in the first place. "Lean back if you need to," he offered as they set off. "It's a fair distance." As they rode, Nora fought to stay alert, but exhaustion and relief conspired against her. She found herself drifting, her head eventually coming to rest against Owen's solid chest. His heartbeat, steady and strong beneath her ear, lulled her into a sense of security she'd nearly forgotten existed. The Triple Creek Ranch materialized like an oasis amid the harsh landscape, a sprawling main house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, corrals filled with horses, and cowboys moving with purpose between tasks. As they approached, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked dark hair rushed down from the porch. "Owen, we were wondering when you'd return from." The woman stopped short when she noticed Nora. "Oh my goodness." "Found her collapsed beside her wagon about 15 miles east," Owen explained as he dismounted, then reached up to help Nora down. "Miss Nora Whitfield, this is my aunt, Harriet Sullivan. She runs the household here since my parents passed." "You poor dear," Harriet said, immediately taking charge. "Let's get you inside and cooled down. You look absolutely parched." "She's been stranded for 3 days," Owen added, his voice tight with restrained anger. "On her way to Copper Creek to marry some fellow named Blackwell." Harriet's eyebrows rose slightly. "Jedediah Blackwell, the merchant?" Nora nodded weakly. "You know him." The older woman's expression turned carefully neutral. "By reputation only. Come along now, let's get you settled." Within an hour, Nora found herself bathed, dressed in a borrowed nightgown and robe, and seated at the kitchen table while Harriet served a hearty stew with fresh bread. Owen had disappeared to send men for her belongings, but returned as she was finishing her meal, feeling better. He asked, his eyes assessing her with genuine concern. "Much thank you," Nora managed a smile. "Your aunt has been most kind." "I've prepared the blue room for you," Harriet announced. "And Owen, I've sent Billy into town with a message for Mr. Blackwell explaining the situation. He should return by morning with a reply." Owen nodded. "Good thinking." To Nora he added, "You should rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out your next steps." That night, lying in the comfortable bed in the blue room, Nora stared at the ceiling, conflicting emotions churning within her. The practical part of her mind reminded her of why she'd agreed to marry Jedediah Blackwell: security, stability, a chance to build a new life after losing her family farm to debt. She'd never met the man, corresponding only through letters arranged by the marriage broker. He seemed decent enough on paper, established, respected, able to provide. Yet she couldn't forget the warmth of Owen's arms around her on the ride to the ranch, the genuine concern in his eyes, or the respectful way he'd treated her despite finding her in such a vulnerable state. There was something about him that made her feel both safe and completely alive in a way she'd never experienced before. "Don't be foolish," she whispered to herself in the darkness. "You made a commitment. One kind cowboy doesn't change that." Morning brought clarity with its golden light. Nora dressed in her own clothes, which someone had retrieved from the wagon and laundered overnight. When she entered the kitchen, she found Owen and Harriet in tense conversation that stopped abruptly at her appearance. "Good morning," she offered hesitantly. "Billy returned with a message," Owen said, his expression unreadable as he held out a folded paper. Nora's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The message was brief and to the point. "Miss Whitfield, your tardiness is most inconvenient. I have business in Santa Fe until month's end. Postpone journey or find alternative arrangements. J. Blackwell." The paper crumpled in her tightening grip. 3 days stranded in the desert, and he calls it tardiness? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Owen and Harriet exchanged glances. "Did Billy speak with Mr. Blackwell directly?" Nora asked. "He did," Owen confirmed, his voice carefully neutral. "Billy said he seemed more annoyed by the interruption to his packing than concerned for your welfare." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. "You're welcome to stay here until he returns," Harriet finally offered. "We have plenty of room." Nora folded the note precisely, her mind racing. I think I need some air." She found herself on the porch, staring out at the ranch bathed in morning light. Cowboys moved between chores, horses nickered in the corral, and in the distance, cattle grazed on golden grassland. It was beautiful in a rugged, honest way, nothing like the cramped Pennsylvania farm she'd left behind, nor what she imagined awaited her in Copper Creek. The screen door creaked and Owen stepped out to join her, respecting her space by leaning against the railing several feet away. "Copper Creek isn't going anywhere," he said after a moment. "Neither is Blackwell." "No," she agreed softly, "but I wonder if I should be." Owen turned to face her, his expression serious. "Miss Whitfield, please call me Nora." "Nora." The sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. I won't pretend to understand your situation fully, but I do know that any man who responds that way to news of his bride nearly dying in the desert doesn't deserve her hand." His bluntness startled a laugh from her. "You don't mince words, do you? Not when it matters." He moved closer, his eyes earnest. "Stay, at least for a while. Think things through before you commit yourself to someone who's shown such little regard for your well-being." "And what would I do here?" she challenged, though her heart raced at the prospect. "Well, Harriet could use help with the household. She's been complaining for months that she can't manage it all herself anymore." His mouth quirked in a half-smile. "And I heard you grew up on a farm. Triple Creek could benefit from someone who understands hard work." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the barn, shouting, followed by a horse's panicked whinny. Owen straightened immediately. "Stay here," he instructed. Already moving, Nora watched as he sprinted toward the disturbance. A young stallion had somehow broken free and was rearing dangerously near one of the younger ranch hands who'd backed himself against the corral fence. Without hesitation, Owen approached, his movements calm but purposeful, speaking words she couldn't hear. The horse's ears flicked toward him, its agitation visibly decreasing as Owen slowly reached for its halter. "He has a way with them," Harriet said, having joined Nora on the porch. "Always has, since he was a boy." Nora nodded, transfixed by the quiet confidence with which Owen handled the powerful animal. "What happened to his parents?" she asked softly. "Influenza 3 winters ago," Harriet replied. "Took half the county. Owen was away driving cattle to Kansas City by the time he returned." She shook her head. "He stepped up, took over the ranch, never complained once, though I know he had other dreams once." "What dreams?" "Veterinary school back east. He has a gift for healing animals." Harriet's gaze was fond as she watched her nephew, but family comes first for Owen. "Always has." Later that afternoon, Owen found Nora in the garden behind the house, her sleeves rolled up as she helped Harriet with the weeding. "I sent another message to Copper Creek," he said. "Asked around about Blackwell, thought you might want to know what people say." Nora sat back on her heels, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "And he's wealthy enough, owns the largest mercantile in town. Widower, lost his wife about 2 years ago." Owen paused. "He's also known for driving hard bargains and having a quick temper. His last 3 shop girls quit within months." Nora absorbed this information silently. "Why him?" Owen finally asked. "If you don't mind my asking." She looked down at her soil-stained hands. "My parents died last winter. The farm had debts I couldn't pay. I had to sell everything." Her voice remained steady through practiced control. "The marriage broker said Mr. Blackwell wanted an educated woman who understood accounts and could help with his business. He offered security." "At what cost?" The question hung between them, unanswered but understood. "I should return to the cattle," Owen said after a moment. "But the offer stands your welcome here for as long as you need." Days stretched into a week, then 2. Nora found herself falling into the rhythm of ranch life with surprising ease. Mornings were spent helping Harriet with household management, an area where her education proved useful as she organized accounts and supply inventories. Afternoons often found her in the garden or helping with meals for the ranch hands. She'd even begun riding again, borrowing a gentle mare named Penny for afternoon excursions around the nearby meadows. And then there was Owen. They hadn't spoken directly about her situation since that day on the porch, but she felt his presence everywhere, bringing her wildflowers he'd spotted on the range, ensuring she had a good mount when she wanted to ride, finding excuses to join her and Harriet for evening meals when he might normally have eaten with the hands. His kindness never felt like charity, rather it seemed born of genuine interest and concern. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in spectacular oranges and purples, Nora found Owen on the porch, whittling a small wooden figure. "May I join you?" she asked. He smiled, moving over on the bench. "Always." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle scrape of his knife against wood and the distant lowing of cattle. I received another note from Mr. Blackwell today, she finally said. He returns to Copper Creek next week and expects me to arrive promptly. Owen's hands stilled. I see. After a moment, he resumed his careful carving. And will you go? Nora watched his hands, strong yet capable of such delicate work. I made a commitment to a stranger. Yes, she took a deep breath. But then he was always a stranger. I just didn't realize how much until. She trailed off. Owen set aside his carving and turned to face her. Until I met someone who showed me what true kindness looks like, she finished quietly. Until I realized security means nothing if it comes without respect. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them, acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since he'd first lifted her from the desert floor. Nora, Owen began, his voice rough with emotion. I have no right to ask anything of you. You came west with certain expectations, certain plans, and plans change, she interrupted. People change. I'm not the same woman who left Pennsylvania, and I'm certainly not the same woman who collapsed beside that wagon wheel. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Owen reached for her hand. His palm was calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle as his fingers intertwined with hers. Stay, he said simply, not as household help or a guest. Stay because in these few weeks, I've come to care for you more than I thought possible. Stay because I hope you might feel something for me too. Nora's heart pounded. This wasn't the practical arrangement she'd planned, the safe path she'd chosen out of necessity. This was something wilder, more uncertain, and infinitely more real. What about my agreement with Mr. Blackwell? She asked, though the answer mattered less with each passing second. I'll ride to Copper Creek myself. Explain the situation. Repay whatever expenses he incurred in bringing you west. Owen's thumb traced circles on her palm. If he's half the businessman they say, he'll accept a reasonable settlement. Before she could respond, thundering hoofbeats approached. A rider appeared in the gathering dusk, pushing his horse hard up the drive. Owen stood, instinctively positioning himself in front of Nora. That's Sam Tucker, one of our hands, he explained, frowning. He was supposed to be watching the north pasture tonight. Sam pulled his lathered horse to a stop. Fire, boss, lightning struck near Dixon's Creek. It's spreading fast toward our grazing land. Owen was immediately in motion. Ring the bell, get every man. I want water wagons, shovels, anything we can use to create a fire break. He turned to Nora. Stay here with Harriet. Make sure the house is ready in case we need to treat burns. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Harriet and Nora prepared the dining room as a makeshift infirmary, boiling water, tearing sheets for bandages, and setting out burn salves. Through the windows, they could see the ominous orange glow on the horizon growing brighter. They'll stop it, Harriet reassured, though her own face was drawn with worry. Owen knows what he's doing. It was past midnight when the men began returning exhausted, smoke-stained, but mostly unharmed. The fire had been contained before it reached the main grazing lands or any structures, though they'd lost some fencing and a small area of pasture. Owen was among the last to return, his face and clothes blackened with soot, his eyes red from smoke. When he entered the kitchen where Nora was preparing coffee for the returning men, relief flooded through her so powerfully she nearly dropped the pot. You're all right, she breathed. Takes more than a little fire to keep me down, he attempted to joke, though his voice was hoarse from shouting over the flames. Without thinking, Nora crossed to him, took his face in her hands and kissed him soundly. He froze for just a moment before his arms encircled her, pulling her close despite the soot and sweat. When they finally parted, Owen looked dazed. If that's my reward, I should fight fires more often. Don't you dare, she scolded, though she couldn't stop smiling. I've made my decision, Owen. I'm not going to Copper Creek. His tired face transformed with joy. You're sure? I've never been more certain of anything. She touched his sooty cheek. I came west looking for security, but I found something better. I found home. The following days were a whirlwind. Owen rode to Copper Creek himself, returning with news that Jedediah Blackwell had accepted financial compensation for the inconvenience, seemingly more relieved than disappointed by the broken arrangement. "Man's a businessman through and through," Owen reported. Once he realized no social embarrassment would come from it, he was perfectly amenable to a settlement. With that final obligation settled, Nora felt truly free for the first time since her parents' deaths. Her relationship with Owen blossomed in the open, much to Harriet's obvious delight and the good-natured teasing of the ranch hands. 2 months after Owen had found her collapsed beside that wagon wheel, they stood together under an arbor of wildflowers in the Triple Creek garden. The local minister officiated a simple ceremony attended by the ranch hands, neighbors, and even a few curious townsfolk who'd heard the romantic story of the mail-order bride who found love before reaching her intended groom. "I take you, Nora Whitfield, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Owen vowed, his blue eyes never leaving hers. "I promise to cherish you, respect you, and walk beside you through whatever life brings. You found me when I didn't know I was lost, and I will spend the rest of my days thanking God for bringing you to that broken wagon wheel." Tears shimmered in Nora's eyes as she repeated her own vows. "I take you, Owen Daniels, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I came west seeking security, but found something infinitely more precious, a man whose strength is matched only by his kindness. I promise to stand by you, support you, and love you for all the days of my life." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen swept Nora into his arms, much as he had that first day in the desert, and kissed her to the cheers and applause of their guests. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with dancing in the yard to fiddle music, plentiful food, and flowing spirits. As twilight descended, Owen led his bride away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the ranch. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her from behind as they watched the stars appear one by one. "More than I ever thought possible," she leaned back against him. "I keep thinking about how different things might have been if you hadn't come along when you did." "But I did," he said firmly. "Some might call it chance, I call it providence." Nora turned in his arms to face him. "Do you ever regret it, giving up your chance at veterinary school to run the ranch?" Owen looked thoughtful. "I did sometimes, before you, now." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Now I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." In the years that followed, Triple Creek Ranch thrived under their joint stewardship. Owen's knowledge of cattle and horses combined with Nora's head for figures proved a formidable partnership. Within 3 years, they had expanded their holdings, improved their breeding stock, and welcomed their first child, a daughter with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. Harriet, delighted with her role as honorary grandmother, often remarked how the ranch had come alive again with Nora's arrival. "This place was just surviving before," she told Nora once as they watched Owen teaching their daughter to ride her first pony. "Now it's thriving." When their second child arrived, a son with a mop of dark hair and a curious nature, Owen converted part of the barn into a small veterinary space. Though he never attended formal schooling, his natural talent for healing animals spread throughout the county, bringing ranchers from miles around seeking his expertise. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Owen presented Nora with a small wooden box. Inside lay the carved wooden figure he'd been working on the night she'd told him about Blackwell's letter, a perfect miniature of a bride standing beside a wagon wheel. "To remind us where our story began," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. Nora traced the delicate carving with her fingertip. "It's beautiful, Owen." "Not as beautiful as the real thing," he replied, pulling her close. "I thank God every day that I decided to check the Eastern Trail that morning, that I found you when I did." "So do I," she whispered against his chest. "So do I." As they stood together on the porch of the home they'd built together, not just the physical structure, but the family, the business, the community they'd created, Nora reflected on how differently her life had turned out from what she'd planned. She'd come west seeking mere security and found instead a love that had transformed her. The broken wagon wheel that had seemed like disaster had instead been the first step on a path to happiness greater than she'd ever dared imagine. In Owen's arms, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in brilliant hues, Nora Daniels knew with absolute certainty that sometimes life's greatest blessings arrived in the most unexpected ways, even in the form of a compassionate cowboy finding a collapsed bride beside a wagon wheel in the vast, unforgiving beauty of the American West.